Welcome back to the Ancient Cosmic Clock. I'm Taylor Child.
I'm Brian Lang.
And Pluto, the Harbinger of Death. Does it have any meaning for Christians?
Actually, yeah, that's a good question because, Pluto's outside the Kuiper Belt and Pluto's not considered a planet anymore, right?
You can't even see it, like, in the sky. We only discovered it in the 20th century sometime.
Yeah. And people that study the stars have found a place for it. They've given meaning to it. And the reason why I've kind of have to give pause to its significance and meanings is because of its alignment when Jesus was born. So we have Virgo, the woman, the virgin woman that's in the sky there. And if you look at the biggest star on it towards the bottom, people call that Spica or the seed of the woman.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's usually the grain in her hand that.
Yes, and they'll see it as a grain in the hand. I like to think of it how I would imagine it with like a childlike view of the stars. I kind of picture it as like a birthing canal.
Okay.
Well, Pluto kind of varies a little bit on the horizon. It doesn't do like the same exact line as a lot of the actual planets that are classified actual planets, but it was conjunct in line with the seed of the woman coming out of the birthing canal.
Okay.
The moment Jesus was born.
Really?
And Pluto is its meaning that's assigned is supposed to be about the underworld, about life and death, birth and rebirth.
So that's God coming down to the earth, that theme.
And the idea of it would also bring in the one that has power over death, like the idea of having power over death.
Interesting. So you look at the charts all the way back then and you find that?
Well, you have to look at NASA records and you'll have to go back, and I've got some help with some people.
Yeah, we've got math equations to figure out where stuff was, but really?
Yeah, when I would go through the visual astronomy programs and being able to look at what the sky looked like, I'm like, whoa, that's where Pluto was.
Well, and Pluto moves so slowly because how long is its orbit? Like 300 years, something like that?
Yeah, and whether you believe he was that year, within that time frames, there's a little bit of a debate. There's a lot of bit of debate with Jesus' birth, but like those dates are there.
Yeah.
So I have a hard time dismissing that.
Interesting. So what other meaning do you find from Pluto?
Well, we can flip it to the next screen and talk about it a little more. I talk in the book. I talk about how Pluto and the Earth are maybe synonymous in meaning a little bit, and where the ancients may not have looked at Pluto as like that archetype, but more probably looked at the archetype of the Earth. And it also and I see Earth as the kind of the underworld where we're at, where there's a lot of turmoil here.
Why on earth would you make the comparison to the underworld here? This place is great.
We have a lot of drama here and a lot of divisiveness and tribalism, and sometimes this becomes like an unpleasant place. And
yeah, you mean we're cast here with the murderers and the adulterers?
So, and then since Pluto's on the outside of the Kuiper Belt, it has this, and you asked what other meaning I derive from it. It's kind of the underworld. And I see us as the underworld. So I see this these archetypes that are kind of like in one. So I see where I'm not projecting the idea that the ancients were really following Pluto. I see that as kind of a fun surprise in today's era, to be able to look at the stars and see that kind of cool alignment with this significance that people have associated it with, and having an alignment of Jesus' birth. I find that cool.
Well, and I think there are a lot of those, just as a quick tangent, there's a lot of those kinds of ideas that, when you look at the sky, you see what the ancients would see. But when we look at it with modern instruments, you can see even more. Like somebody pointed out to me that the Gemini constellation, for example, a lot of the stars that are in that are binary stars. They're twin stars. And the ancients wouldn't necessarily have known that, and yet it still fits.
Yeah,
the theme.
I've
got twins on the brain. I recently had twins, ladies and gentlemen.
Congratulations. So another archetype of Pluto is transformation too.
Transformation. Okay.
So yeah, so let's with that let's jump into like what we're going through, what's happening.
So yeah, where is Pluto in the sky today?
Let's rewind a little bit. Right now we're on the cusp of Aquarius and Pisces. But let's
Aquarius and Capricorn.
Yeah, Aquarius and Capricorn.
Right between those two.
So let's go back. Sagittarius is like the arrow, and the arrow that shoots like up and it comes down.
Mhm.
And there are some other archetypes from ancient tradition that relate it to like a tower crashing to the ground. And what's interesting is when Pluto aligned with Sagittarius, and we'll probably maybe we'll dedicate a whole podcast to a whole video to 9/11, but where Pluto represents death and rebirth and destruction. When it was in Sagittarius, which carries one of the archetypes is the tower, our twin towers in America came down.
That's a little on the nose, isn't it?
It is. And Sagittarius also carries the archetype of like higher learning and religion and that kind of stuff. And what's interesting is as I read like an article at the time of 9/11 that more people started going to church right after 9/11, but it was kind of at an all-time low, and then somewhat after it they kind of dropped off again.
But, I remember the Sunday following 9/11 we had in the church where I was growing up a congressman, our local congressman who has passed on since then, but they had him come and speak to the church. Like that whole it was the strangest church service I've ever been to, honestly. They had a whole like flag ceremony and everything. It was like patriotism church, and you have a congressman speaking, and it was a different era.
Yeah, so you have this like up and downs, fluctuations in like religion, which Sagittarius is that archetype, the arrow things going up and down, and also the destruction of the tower, also the diminishment of like religion, because you have death and rebirth, transformation in that alignment at that time around 9/11. And you remember off the top of your head how long Pluto kind of stays in a constellation? 20 years, 2 decades almost?
20 years ish. I think that's fair enough, close enough for government work.
And then what happens? So we're right on the cusp of an age. So we need to talk about like what's happened the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Because and Pluto and Capricorn being the father archetype, being the government archetype. We had like a duel where we had Pluto and Saturn both like in
well, they were both moving into Aquarius together a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah.
Or because Pluto moves so slowly that
right.
Not quite moving into Aquarius together.
But we have this transformation of government because it's transformation too. And have we seen transformation of government in the last few years?
Unfortunately.
Another big archetype of that, Capricorn being the father figure. And if you notice, Cancer's opposite 180 degrees. Cancer is the mother figure of the zodiac. Once again, they're all represented in perfect balance with their opposite. But we have this like where Pluto's been in, which is kind of more of an ominous sign, has been diminishing like male, masculine, authoritative figures. There's been like a strong, like wanting to transform toxic masculinity into something else. It's diminished it.
Yeah, well, traditional masculinity, even like that term toxic masculinity, I think you could call it traditional masculinity.
But when Pluto's there, it's both archetypes. Capricorn's going to carry both archetypes. Pluto's going to be this like bringing death to it. And so we're going to see this transition and how the previous part on the clock here, that we're calling this the clock, the seasons, where it's what's going to be happening next. And we'll go into that in a bit when you've taken out the stronger male figures. And then we're moving into an energy where
so Aquarius we've talked about is social constructs, appropriate behavior. What's Pluto and Aquarius going to look like?
We've probably already seen a little bit of that cusping energy where it took down a little bit of our gatherings, but I hate to say this because it may freak people out, But once we got
So
in,
don't watch this video if you're going to freak out.
yes, don't watch this video if you're going to freak out. But it's the idea, because Aquarius can represent social constructs, but also represents people in general. Because John gives the definition of it represents people. People's the first one he says.
People, like as in groups of people, like a people, right?
Or even people, just us, the general public.
Hmm.
And you bring death. Let's look at this. Let's measure this.
I really hope you're wrong about what you're saying right now.
We have a lot of biblical prophecy talking about a lot of people dying.
Yeah, I really hope you're wrong, but I don't think you are. That's the scary thing on here. I'm going to freak out.
But look where it's at. It's on the cusp. And once again, the science is once you've got within 3 to 4 degrees, it's affecting it. And you saw COVID come in with that. You saw a little bit more people die. And then when you got within about 1 or 2 degrees, and it was like right there, and in our science of explaining this, you'll find this over and over again, that it's affecting once it's that close. Even if it's not in perfectly according to the clock, once it's close. We had a Turkey earthquake, and we had like around 50,000 people die that have been counted so far.
Yeah. I mean, that's apocalyptic for anyone living over there.
And it's anecdotal, but like we keep having things pop up of people we hear of dying. Even a friend of ours recently.
Yeah. His funeral's Friday, and it's going to be he wasn't old enough to die. It was
just a lot of randomness. And I've been saying this, like, we're entering this season where more people are going to die. Like or it could manifest in that. But the idea is, we've talked about this in other episodes, where Aquarius wants a transformation. We're entering in that age, and now we're also having that Pluto, the planet that represents transformation, go into that, to where it's going to clean up what's going in Aquarius so that we can go into that golden age. There's a purpose to this.
So there's a positive side to Pluto, because everything we've talked about with Pluto feels a little bit like, well, there's going to be some death and destruction, some more death, some more destruction, some more horrible things, also the underworld. And by the way, you're living in the underworld.
Okay, we pick on, let's use Saturn as an example too, because Saturn's Big Daddy scary too, right?
Yeah, we always pick on Saturn.
So let's pretend that like the destroying angel is going to visit you, and he's going to enforce a Sabbath and whatever you're doing. Let's say you just want to work that day, and for some reason Saturn's aligned against you that day, and it's going to stop you from whatever you're trying to do. That sucks, right?
Potentially, but maybe it's not so bad.
What if you planned a vacation where like you were going to take a day of rest that day?
Yeah, so if you know.
And like all the work things that were going to happen that were going to stop you from working, if you were just on the beach, it doesn't matter. It's just less phone calls you get.
So you were just kind of leaning into it.
So it's like this. You need some stuff done, and everybody's ignoring your work phone calls. You can't get a hold of anybody because you have Saturn aligned against you, stopping you. And it's frustrating trying to get anything done because none of your helpers are showing up. But then you take the energy or the archetype to the beach, and you're just not getting the phone calls. The phone calls
will still be there on Monday. Yeah.
They're not, the people that weren't answering, it doesn't matter. Like, it just means less people are gonna, in the same archetype, they're not calling you.
So if we're back to Pluto and Aquarius, what does that mean? Set your affairs in order, get ready to die?
No. What if because Pluto represents transformation. What if we just change? What if we just transform? That's like the whole point of the gospel.
Yeah.
What if we transform and we just naturally go into the golden age, all of us, and then there doesn't need to be.
Yeah. What if we accept the need for transformation? What if we accept the need to make a change, to turn and to face God and become what he would have us be?
And then
that fits the Pluto archetype.
Yeah. You've honored the energy. You've honored the archetype. You've honored the clock.
And ironically, if after having done that, you end up having to face death, you face death well prepared.
Peacefully.
And you have a good death, as the Vikings would want, right?